So that's what the depression does. And, when you have that depression, you're usually, sometimes there's overeating. When you see people that are just obese, at the heart of it, if we pull back the onion, there's some type of adverse childhood experience. And usually that adverse experience, something bad that happened during childhood, is sexual trauma and shame. So you develop a coping skill of comforting yourself with the chemical called food. Yeah, food is a chemical. It is a drug. And what makes it as a drug is because it alters your consciousness and the functioning of your brain. So we learned very early that when I feel this way and I eat, then my brain has a reaction and now I feel this way. So that becomes the brain's way of coping with pain, and the brain's way of coping with anxiety. It can also go the other way where you don't eat and you have an eating disorder and you're restricting and, because you don't feel like you deserve to eat or you want to be in control because you were out of control. And so that also can be an issue. But we want to understand that the impact of it is that it keeps us in a cycle of dysfunction. It keeps us away from being our best self. It keeps us from being healed and from walking through the grief process and the healing process. And that's what we'll talk about next month. So it's important to know when people don't have interest, people like to sleep a lot. When they're stressed, they like to sleep a lot, or they shut down and something goes wrong at work or something goes wrong in the relationship, and their mode of operation is shut down. Shut down. Just go into isolation, hibernate. So when you're in that bear mode, that could also be that you've opened up that pain door of sexual trauma. And so your experience is, this is what I do when I'm in pain. This is what I do when I'm hurting. I shut down. I eat. I don't eat. I utilize drugs. Food is a drug, but then there's actual drugs sometimes people use to self-medicate. And that is a maladaptive coping skill. But what do you do? And I'm not making excuses for any of this, but what do you do when you don't have any skills? You use the skills that you see other people using, or that maybe you stumbled across and you're making it work. You're surviving. And when you're in survival mode, you do survival things. Your behavior is very connected to that survival mentality. So that's what it looks like. That's what you're looking at. And then you can also look at how your person, their sleeping habits. How do they sleep? Do they sleep really hard, or do they not sleep at all? That insomnia, that can be connected to an underlining sexual trauma issue. And even the startle reflex, if you have, of someone, or if you talk in your sleep, or if you're easily startled, that could also be connected with the memory of being startled in your sleep. So it's important that we understand what our brain is doing. Sometimes our brain, is trying to overcompensate and trying to bring us back to a homeostasis of peace. The brain remembers eating. So it's always trying to set us at eating, but it's doing it in a natural way. Only the Spirit of God can set us back at eating, and then it brings our natural man into order, and our spiritual man leads it. But what happens is our brain operates outside of the spirit realm, and it's always trying to feed you and I things to get us back to Eden. So if we're depressed or if we're fearful, it's always trying to find natural things to stabilize us and to help us to cope. Sometimes that even means OCD. When people have, obsessive compulsive disorder, that's not cleaning. Cleaning can be a symptom of it, but we think that, I like to clean, so I have OCD. OCD is deeper than that. It's an anxiety-driven, impulsive behavior that you are doing in order to reduce the anxiety that comes in your body, and you can't help yourself. And it's rituals that you begin to keep in order to reduce the anxiety that you're feeling and your desire to be in control. And that can get very, very deep. And we talked about the substance and the drugs. I like to say now, people are really dealing with, marijuana because it's legal. They've been dealing with alcohol. When you find an alcoholic, it's just not recreational all the time. So you have to be sensitive to know, what are they running from? What about reality that's so hard in that depersonalization and derealization and dissociation is not working? They found an elevated state through drug use to help them to numb themselves. And so they'd rather be numb than deal with the confusion and the toxic guilt and shame associated with being sexually violated and feeling horrible. And so that happens. Those are the symptoms. And we have to know that it is so prevalent. One of the things I read this week was that every 73 seconds, someone is sexually assaulted. And every 9 minutes, that someone is a child. And these symptoms are lasting. I want to talk about hyposexuality and hyper. And I'm going to talk about identity crisis as it relates to sexual trauma in another session. I'll probably get to that in June. But it's important to know that you can become hypersexual. And when I look at hypersexual, I connect that to anxiety, because it can be a impulsivity, and it could be the person's desire to try to reduce all the energy or the feelings. When you start feeling the feelings, then that makes you nervous because you don't like to feel. So what am I going to do with this feeling? And the anxiety is just an indicator that you have unfinished business, or you don't deal with your emotions. So you don't know how to sit and feel. So you've got to try to do something to appease yourself. So what that looks like is you can start to utilize sex as a drug, because there are chemicals that are released when you are sexually active, y'all. And it's on purpose. Remember, we talked about it, the endorphins, the oxytocin, all the things that bind you together with the person, because God made it that way. So you're getting this cocktail, this explosion of pleasure. And so you learn that grounds you. If I'm anxious, I kind of can get that relief, and then I do it, and then I'm back feeling sad because it's guilt and shame, because it's outside of the confines of marriage. And even if you're doing that in your marriage, it doesn't satisfy because your motivation is wrong. You're still practicing sex the way you learned it, from a take perspective and just purely from a pleasure perspective, and not a unification tool, right? So we have this hypersexuality that's going on. I mean, come on, especially in the African-American community. It's going on everywhere, but we're so expressive, and we put dubs on everything. We're a lot. And so we see it with the rappers are always talking about sex. Come on, you always talking about sex. Is that all life is about for you? That means you're not sexually satisfied, and you're hypersexual, and you're impulsive. And now you don't use sex the way God designed it. You use it as a tool to help you relax, just to help you feel good. You're not using it to connect and love. You're not using it to join. You're not using it for innocent pleasure. You're using it inappropriately the way you learned it. And when you're hypersexual, it's just like you can't get enough. You can't get enough. I know that Scottie Pippen's wife, I'm going to say it because she said it. She said that they were having sex 4 and 5 times a day. Now, if you are having sex 4 and 5 times a day with your spouse because you guys love each other and your intention is to join, there's still something that might be there, some compulsiveness, and it may not be related to sexual abuse, but there's still something might be there that you just, got a lot going on there. But when you have been sexually violated, 4 to 5 times is not enough. You would go all night, all day. I've had clients who have told me that their mate wakes them up at 2:00 in the morning. They want it all day and all night, almost like a bottle. You know, like the babies who drink all through the night and they just want to kind of put their mouth on their mother just to feel it. So you become accustomed to sex as a drug or as a coping skill to help your nervous system wind down. Now, are there times when you're stressed out with your spouse and you're like, hey, you know, I need to take the edge off. I want to come together with you and we want to like just kind of cover our marriage? That's different. But if your sole purpose is that you're just using sex for yourself and you know you can't get enough, that's the same gluttonous mindset that people have when they overeat. You can be over-sexualized, and that's what we're seeing in our society, and it is a result of sexual trauma. Unauthorized sex, because the more unauthorized sex you have, the more you want to have. And it's insatiable. You'll never be full. It's like eating empty calories. You'll never be full. You'll get sick first and you'll be bloated, but you'll never get full. The nutrients aren't there. So the nutrients are not in the sexual relationship when you're just having sex because you're hypersexual. And the danger of that is that in that bubble and being hypersexual, it's only you're trying to satisfy yourself. And usually there's masturbation, usually there is pornography, and usually there are all of those things that get you like preoccupied with sex the unauthorized way. And yes, I have to tell you that masturbation is wrong according to the scriptures because you're having sex with yourself. Sex was designed for you and your partner. And again, when I talk about sexual identity and identity crisis and homosexuality and lesbianism, I'm going to break out and I'm going to show you that contributes to that. Because if you're a man having sex with a man, meaning you're masturbating, you're a man having sex with a man. You are the man. And that's why people broke out and were saying, I'm going to marry myself. That's not God's design for sex or for marriage. So I'll get back to that. If you're still watching, don't turn me off. But that hypersexual thing is really bad and you just can't get enough. You can't get enough. You can't get enough. And you just, it enlarges itself. Like the more you do, the more you want. And in one of the studies I was looking at, and they were talking about the sexual violence. Like you go from pornography. A lot of people are going from pornography to sex with watching sexual violence with children, right? It says 65% of people watching that have been sexually abused watch pornography. And then and 24% watch pornography daily. And what happens is the more you watch in your hypersexuality, you become desensitized.